5 spine-chilling accounts of terrifying haunts encountered while walking home alone at night. Jessica could feel the weight of the night pressing down on her as she walked home alone. The air crackled with an unsettling energy, and every shadow seemed to coil like a predator in waiting. She had always loved this quiet suburban neighborhood, but tonight, the dimly lit streets transformed into a labyrinth of fear. Each step of her sneakers on the pavement echoed like a warning, amplifying her racing heart. Glimpses from the corners of her eye made her stomach twist. A rustle from the bushes, a flicker in a window, each little sound sent shivers darting down her spine. She thought about the stories she had heard as a child, tales of night stalkers preying on unsuspecting women, stories her parents had spun while lighting up the calmness of their home. She felt the same primal terror she'd fought so hard to overcome creeping back. Then, from the shadows, a figure emerged, a local teenager known for helping the elderly with their groceries. But tonight, he looked different. His once shiny hair was disheveled, and his clothes hung off him, ragged and dirty. Their eyes met, and his were not the bright windows of childhood innocence anymore, they burned with a wild, unsettling hunger. Jessica's heart raced as panic clawed at her throat. Was he even the same boy? Or had the darkness of these streets twisted him into something monstrous? Quickening her pace, the ancient oak trees lining the street swayed ominously like they were alive, whispering secrets about the past. Jessica! Jessica! Their gnarled branches seemed to beckon her, coaxing terrible and twisted tales of betrayal long buried beneath the surface of her seemingly perfect neighborhood. She could almost feel the weight of each whispered sin, etched into the very soil of the streets she walked every day. A sickening scent reached her nostrils, the rot of the nearby subway station, filling her with unease. The flickering streetlights cast erratic shadows, morphing into grotesque shapes that danced just beyond her vision. In the split second her childhood instincts kicked in, she felt like a scared little girl again, as memories echoed with parental voices warning her of lurking dangers in the dark. Jessica's breath quickened, and each stride became frantic as fear propelled her away from whatever strange energy gripped her neighborhood. Her footsteps became a frantic rhythm, an urgent beat that wove with the chilling echoes she imagined followed her from behind. Breathless, she glanced back, only to find the street behind her empty. That palpable void heightened her anxiety as the silence suffocated her, her heart raced, a wild thing pounding in her chest. In the terrors of her perception, her neighbor, an elderly man she'd once admired, stood rigidly still in his front yard. His gaze pinned her in place, unnaturally calm, as shadows melded into his features. For a heartbeat, she hesitated, captured in the web of his unsettling presence. But then, fragmented stories from her childhood rushed back, the gritty edge of betrayal scrawled across the town's history like blood stains on a white shirt. Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. The weight of realization crashed over her. The terror wasn't hidden in the alleyways or lurking in the vacant lots, it was here, among those she thought she knew. Fear clawed at her throat as she took a step closer to home. Suddenly, every shadow seemed to quiver, reaching out to her, clutching at her ankles. Her blood ran cold, and she knew she was dancing on the knife's edge of danger, trapped between familiarity and the haunting impression of predators lurking just out of sight. What truths about her town awaited her in the dark? The icy fingers of dread wrapped around Jessica as she bolted down the sidewalk, each breath sharp and frantic. The memory of the elderly man's gaze lingered like a malevolent fog that clouded her thoughts. She had grown up believing that the familiarity of her neighborhood was a shield. But now, every house seemed to hold dark secrets, every porch light flickered with an echo of terror. Suddenly, a scream sliced through the silence like a knife. It echoed down the darkened street, sending her heart racing into overdrive. Was it a woman? A child? She stopped in her tracks, frozen in panic, the sound clawing at her sanity. It came from just beyond the corner, a place where the light dimmed into blackness. Swallowing hard, she knew she shouldn't go towards it, but then she heard it again, a low, desperate wail that tore through the stillness. Without giving herself a chance to think rationally, she edged closer, drawn by a force she couldn't comprehend. The trees parted as she stepped into the darkness, their branches whispering warning, but her feet carried her forward. There, in the shadows, a figure sprawled on the ground. It was a girl, maybe 16, tangled in her own hair, gasping in distress. "What's wrong?" Jessica called, but the words felt flimsy in the air. The girl looked up, her face pale, eyes wild with fear. "Help me, please," she begged. But as Jessica knelt down, she realized the girl wasn't alone. Shapes moved in the shadows, creeping closer, forming a ring around them, and the girl's gaze darted between them and Jessica. The scream was actually more chilling now, a chorus of soft whispers, grating against her mind. "You shouldn't have come, you shouldn't have," the voices hissed in unison, dripping with malice as they closed in around her. Jessica's throat tightened, heart pounded. She felt the cold prickle of terror at the back of her neck. I'll help you," Jessica stammered, though fear gripped her, paralyzing her resolve. The girl's wide eyes mirrored her own growing horror. In the dim light, Jessica caught a glimpse of their faces, twisted, emaciated forms, grinning with sickening delight. Shadows wove around them like a veil, the faint silhouettes of clawed hands reaching for her, hungry and feral. With a surge of adrenaline, Jessica jumped to her feet. She turned to run but felt a breath against her cheek, an icy whisper that sent her mind reeling. "You can't escape. You're one of us now." The words twirled inside her head, nodding into her thoughts, drowning her hope. Desperate, she bolted towards the nearest streetlight, its flickering glow a tiny sanctuary amidst the consuming dark. But as she ran, every footfall resounded with an ominous echo, as if the very ground was trying to pull her back. And when she glanced behind, the girl was gone. The figures in the shadows melted into the night, leaving only their chilling laughter hanging in the air. Jessica stumbled, gasping for breath, and finally broke into a sprint once more. Fumbling for her phone, she fumbled with her trembling fingers to call for help. But her screen flickered, glitching and flickering as if playing tricks on her. "No, no," she murmured, panic rising like bile. She had to get home. Had to escape the encroaching darkness that wrapped around her like a serpent, suffocating and cold. But as she reached her street, her heart sank deeper. Her house stood there, inviting and familiar, but the front door was ajar. Maybe she was already too late. What waited for her inside? Would she dare to find out? Jessica clutched her phone tightly, the screen flickering ominously in her grasp, pulsating like a dying heart. She hesitated for a moment at the threshold. The peach-colored door that often welcomed her now loomed like a gaping maw. The faint sound of her father's old clock ticking inside faded against the sounds of the night, a comforting rhythmic beat that felt miles away. "Mom? Dad?" The words slipped out in a whisper, her voice barely above the rustling of leaves. Anxiety clawed at her throat as she stepped inside, the air thick with darkness that seemed to swallow the light. Immediately, an unsettling chill ran down her spine. The hallway felt longer than usual, shadows pooling into corners like spilled ink. The flickering lamp in the living room cast grotesque shapes that danced along the wall. The familiar turned alien in an instant. Jessica's instincts screamed at her to turn back, but the thought of those figures lurking outside propelled her deeper into the house. Cautiously, she moved forward, grateful for the distant glow that spilled from the kitchen. Suddenly, a creaking noise sliced through the silence, echoing the dread in her heart. She flinched, her breath hitching. "Is anyone there?" The words trembled on her lips, feeding the silence that danced around her. No answer came, just the oppressive weight of the dark growing heavier. She took a step towards the kitchen, and as she did, she heard it, a whisper, faint and sinister, drifting from the bathroom. "Help me, you shouldn't have come." The voice mirrored the girl south from the street, a haunting melody of despair that clawed at her sanity. Jessica's instincts kicked into overdrive. Drawing a shaky breath, she pressed onward, needing to see what lurked within. The door to the bathroom stood half open, curtains billowing slightly, as if something unseen were trying to escape. She pushed it open, heart hammering in her chest. The bathroom was eerily quiet. The mirror reflected her own terrified eyes back at her, but the image felt distorted, warped. She didn't trust it. In the bathtub, the water was dark, thick as ink, shimmering like a dark portal. Jessica shivered, torn between fear and her growing curiosity. "Hello?" she asked, her voice betraying her. What was that? The whisper seemed to slip through the cracks of her sanity, curling around her ears. It was right behind her now. Just as she turned, the bathroom light flickered, momentarily plunging her into darkness. And then, the mirror shattered, a cascade of glass exploding outward, sending sharp shards spinning across the floor. Jessica screamed, eyes wide. She stumbled backward, catching her foot on the edge of the bathtub, and fell hard. Pain shot through her arm, but she couldn't focus on that. Tendril-like shadows crawled across the floor towards her, slick and slithering. In a panic, she rolled away, reaching for the door. But something held her back. She turned just in time to see a fractured reflection of herself grinning back in atrocious mimicry that sent her heart racing, the laughter of twisted voices echoing in her mind. "No! Get away!" She kicked backward and scrambled towards the door, pulling herself up just as the shadows swarmed around her, their breath like icy fingers curling around her ankles. With one last effort, she tore the door open and bolted down the hall, breathless and terrified. The living room loomed ahead, but would she find safety there, or would it too be veiled in that darkness? For a brief moment, she caught a glimpse of movement in the corner of her eye, just a flash. She turned quickly, terror washing over her, and came face to face with a figure. "Jessica," it whispered from the shadows, and every hair on her body stood on end, chills racing through her. What did it want from her? What did it know? As she tried to comprehend, the walls began to breathe around her, warping as the shadows danced closer, eager to drown her in despair. Could she escape, or had she unwittingly walked into her own grave? Jessica stumbled into the living room, the flickering light casting mad shadows across the walls. The figure loomed in the doorway, its features obscured by the dim light, but its eyes were unmistakably sharp, gleaming with a predatory hunger. "Jessica," the voice wasn't just a whisper, it was a rasp that knifed through the air. She froze, her heart slamming against her ribcage like a caged animal. Panic clawed at her throat, begging for escape, but her legs felt rooted to the ground. "Stay away from me!" she yelled, though her voice wavered, cracking under the weight of her fright. She knew her parents' outlines were somewhere in the shadows, but they felt as distant as the dead stars. "Help me!" the figure's voice shifted, blending into the wails of despair she had heard before. "You shouldn't have come home." With every word, the room seemed to shudder. The shadows danced closer, elongating like hungry creatures that thrived on fear. Jessica's instincts screamed at her to truck through the darkness that threatened to consume her. Just to her left, a rusty floorboard creaked. She glanced over, and a chill knifed through her spine as she saw the kitchen light flicker, almost as if it was alive and desperately trying to ward off the wanted darkness. Suddenly, the lights in the living room blared to life, drowning out the creeping gloom. The washed-over space felt safe for a moment, as if the shadows were pushed back, but she could still feel them lurking restless and malicious at the edges of her vision. She seized the opportunity, bolting towards the front door, praying it was still unlocked. Each step felt heavy, as if the air had turned thick with dread. The figure's laughter echoed behind her, intertwining with the whispering shadows. Fingers scraped against her arm, a chill that felt like ice sliding into her skin. Jessica gasped and twisted, ready to fight whatever had tried to grab her. The specter of the broken mirror surged into her mind, its mocking grin still fresh. "Let me go!" she screamed, shoving her shoulder against the door. But it wouldn't budge, something was pressing against it from the other side. The oppressive grip of dread swirled around her, and she couldn't breathe. "You can't escape," the figure hissed, stepping fully into the light. It was her, exactly like her, yet twisted and malevolent. "I am your truth." Panic erupted as Jessica stumbled backward. A rush of disbelief flooded her. It wasn't just a shadow, it was a reflection of the worst parts of herself, a harbinger of her darkest thoughts that had come to life. "No. I'm not like you." "Yes, you are. Just look around." The creature flicked a finger, and the living room morphed. The familiar decor twisted into grotesque shapes, mocking her sanity. "You brought us here. You wanted to know." She shook her head desperately, willing the swirling shadows to dissipate, but all she felt was the cold embrace of despair tightening around her throat. "Help! Someone help me!" But the house was silent, a tomb of solitude echoing with her cries. Then she noticed at the open window at the far end of the living room, a pitiful breath of escape, calling out to her above the cacophony of taunting whispers. She sprinted toward it, desperate to break free from the truth that wanted to claim her. The creature lunged, a blur of darkness, its hands grasping at her. Jessica leapt over the shards of shattered reality beneath her feet, one hand grasping the window frame. The air rushed past her, thick and biting. Just as she climbed through, the grasping fingers snatched at her heels. With a surge of adrenaline, she yanked herself free and tumbled into the night, breathless, but as she landed on the cool grass, the whisper followed her, weaving through the night air. "You cannot leave so easily, Jessica will always be here." As she lay there, gasping for breath, the shadows curled around the edges of her vision, whispering promises of return. The reflection was not just in the house, it was in her. Jessica scrambled to her feet and stumbled away from the darkness, every instinct telling her danger lurked just behind. Her heart raced as she ran. Where would she go? The night thrummed around her, alive and malevolent. But what if it waited for her return, like an unrelenting nightmare? As she fled into the night, a thought shadowed her mind. Was there a place safe enough to escape the specter of her own fears? Jessica ran, the cold air biting at her lungs as she dashed down the street, glancing back over her shoulder. The shadows seemed to stretch and twist, mocking her with the remembered laughter of her own reflection. How could something so despair-filled exist inside her? She veered onto a narrow alley, the walls flanking her like menacing giants. Each footfall echoed ominously, a reminder that she couldn't outrun what she carried inside. The world beyond seemed distant, hazy in the flickering streetlights. A shiver crawled down her spine as the alley swallowed her in its darkness. The light faded quickly, the scent of dampness and decay wrapping around her, heavy as fog. As she approached the end of the alley, she noticed a figure standing still amongst the shadows. Her heart dropped. "Help!" The voice was feeble, almost a whisper, but identical to the creature back in the house. "Jessica, please. I need you." Panic surged through her, turning her blood cold. Could it be more than just a cruel trick? Was it another aspect of that twisted self? She was paralyzed, staring at the silhouette. A part of her wanted to approach, another screamed to run. "Please," the figure urged, stepping forward into the sickly light. It was her, another version, eyes pleading yet filled with that same malevolence. "You can save me, you can save us both." "No!" Jessica shouted, shaking her head furiously, backing away. "You're not real. Are you so sure? We are intertwined. You need me to understand," it hissed softly, almost tenderly, like a serpent coiling around its prey. The shadows behind her thickened, creating a wall that pushed her closer to the creature. "Stop! Get away!" She screamed again, backing up against the damp concrete wall. The darkness crept closer, curling around her ankles, rooting her in place. The creature raised a hand, and in that instant, the world around Jessica erupted. Reality twisted and boiled, blurring her sense of self. She could feel the weight of memories surfacing, years of suppressed fears, failures, and anguish that had lived inside her, whispering all the things she loathed about herself. "You can't run from me, Jessica," the creature chuckled, its voice intertwining with the echoes of her own insecurities. "You brought me here. You made me." With a surge of defiance, Jessica screamed, "No. You don't own me." She pushed off the wall, surprising herself with a newfound vigor. The moment her feet moved, a crack opened in the darkness. As she dashed past her sinister twin, she felt a jagged rush of air, as if moving through a veil of memories trying to drag her back. Pushing hardest against the malevolence tugging at her, she barreled towards the alley's mouth, emerging onto the street once more. But it wasn't over. She could hear it, the low whispers threaded through the air like taunts woven into her blood. The shadows had not receded, they followed, an army of nightmares eager to reclaim their territory. Jessica stumbled into the bustling diner on the corner, the warmth a stark contrast to the night. As she stepped inside, a wave of relief washed over her, but she was breathless. Heads turned, and voices hushed, shock and concern evident in the eyes of the patrons. "Are you all right?" A voice broke through the surreal veil. A kind face, an older waitress, reached out to her with a touch that felt so grounded. "Please, I need help," Jessica gasped, but as her words left her lips, another chilling reality sunk in. What if the figure hadn't just followed her outside, but seeped deep within? The whispers returned, sharper now, echoes of promises that chaos and despair were only breaths away. The realization dawned, she could find shelter among strangers, but the reflection that chased her still lived inside. And in that instant, a flicker of movement cut through the diner, the door swinging open yet again. The shadows flickered in behind someone, a familiar figure spilling into the light, grinning malevolently. "You think you can hide?" It called out, its voice wrapping around her like chains, mocking the fragile hope that remained. "We are one. I am you." As Jessica's heart raced, the choice pressed heavily upon her: confront the darkest parts of herself or let them consume her entirely. What lay ahead would challenge her to accept more than just survival, it would force her to confront the deepest truths of who she was. But in that diner, a new silence fell, one that promised dread beyond comprehension. Would the truth break her? Would she face the reflection again, or would the shadows finally claim their due? Jessica's breath hitched in her throat as she stared at the figure that had entered the diner. It was unmistakably the twisted reflection of herself, the cruel smile spreading across its face sending a fresh wave of panic through her. The safe haven of the diner, filled with chatter and the clinking of cutlery, felt like a fragile bubble ready to burst. "Stay away from me!" she shouted, pushing through the crowd toward the back exit, but the whispers enveloped her like thick smoke. The patrons around her looked on, eyes wide with confusion and fear, their conversations dying as the atmosphere shifted. Jessica sensed their gazes lingering on her, a mix of uncertainty and horror brewing among them. "Why run from what you are?" her reflection taunted. It stepped forward, and the diners recoiled, shifting backward in their booths as if it was manifesting an insidious force. "You can't escape this, not here, not anywhere." The world around her dimmed, as she felt the shadows creeping over the walls, leeching light from the diner. Tables slid unnaturally, chairs scraping back as if drawn by unseen strings. A flicker of rage ignited within Jessica. "You don't control me." She turned, but the reflection laughed, its voice now a cacophony of dissonance echoing in her mind. "Then why do you keep running? You think you can hide behind these walls?" It threw its arms wide, welcoming the darkness that slithered in. "When will you realize that I am your truth?" Jessica slammed through the exit door, adrenaline surging. She stumbled onto the street again, the cold night air hitting her like icy fingers. But once more, the shadows poured around her, choking the dying streetlights. The distant sound of laughter twisted with indistinct whispers, and she felt the ground beneath shift, tilting her world into chaos. The streets were deserted now. The diner behind her faded into an echo of panic, replaced by a suffocating silence. "You can't escape." The voice hissed, now closer. Her heart thundered in her chest as she dashed around the corner into another alley, desperation fueling her steps. Each breath felt heavier, laden with the weight of doubt. What if it's right? The thought whispered, a seed of terror growing roots inside her mind. A flicker of movement caught her eye. There, against the brick wall, shadows twisted, contorting into grotesque visions. Faces she recognized, old friends, family shadows of the past twisted by pain and regret. "We're lost, just like you, Jess," they murmured in unison, their voices an eerie lullaby. "Shut up. You're not real." She pressed her palms against her ears, but still, they called to her. Each phrase a dagger: "Face your fears, Jessica. You can't shut us out forever." With a gasp, she stumbled back. Around her, the darkness coiled tighter, a sentient being hungry for her despair. "Who are you?" she yelled, desperation tinged with defiance. The shadows congealed, gathering strength, forming her reflection more and more vividly within. "Tell me." The laughter morphed into a chilling roar, enveloping her. "You know who I am. I am the anger you shun, the shadow you fear." As the being took a step forward, the entire landscape shifted. The ground beneath her convulsed, making her lose her footing. The world warped, colors blending into a vortex. Horror surged through Jessica, searching for an escape she couldn't see, but then, from the depths of her despair, a thought emerged. What if she didn't have to fight them alone? What if there was a way to understand this twisted part of herself instead of running? In that moment of realization, the streets pulsed with a dark rhythm. The chaos around her faded, giving way to a sickening clarity. What if facing her demons was the only way to extinguish the shadows seeking to claim her? The question hung heavy in the air. As she steadied herself against the alley wall, the shadows faltered for a moment. Could she confront her darker self? And if she did, would it finally break the cycle or plunge her into something worse? Dread hung over her like a storm cloud, ominous and ready to strike. As the first crack of lightning lit up the sky, Jessica knew she was at a crossroads. She could keep running, but the truth loomed closer. Would the fight for her soul end in liberation or total obliteration? Jessica stood trembling, her pulse pounding in her ears, each thud matching the tempo of the storm brewing overhead. Rain began to fall, cold drops striking her face, mixing with the sweat on her brow. The shadows surrounding her pulsed rhythmically as if in sync with the thunder, each flash of lightning illuminating faces that were both tender and twisted. They gazed at her, silent mourners of their own lost battles. "Face us," her reflection crooned, now merging seamlessly with the others. "Face this, face yourself." Jessica gritted her teeth, feeling her resolve waver. She was terrified, but she also felt a flicker of something deeper. Could that be courage? The wrath of her past clawed at her, as sharp as a knife's edge, and she could feel the weight of regret clinging to her skin. But she wouldn't let it define her. "Enough!" she shouted into the abyss, her voice cracking. "I won't let you take me down with you." The shadows writhed, their forms shifting as they whispered words that echoed in her mind. "You think you can beat us? You've always been running, haven't you?" Look inside. As they continued their taunts, the scenery warped further. The alley stretched, becoming a winding, endless tunnel of darkness. Desperation clawed at her throat as she took a step backward, trying to escape the encroaching nightmares. But there was nowhere to run. The shadows advanced, swirling around her legs like tendrils, grasping at her like the hands of the lost. Jessica balled her fists, an ember of defiance igniting again. She couldn't afford to be a victim. "I see you," she called out, her voice stronger. "All of you. You're not going to haunt me anymore." The figures, her own reflections, screeched in unison, their cries a cacophony that vibrated through the very air around her. "You're just like us. You'll never escape." The tunnel bent inward, the walls vibrating, making it harder for her to breathe. The voices laughed, hissing like serpents, and her vision blurred. But as she pressed her palms against the slick brick wall for support, she felt something shift. A flicker of memory surged through her, moments of joy mixed with strife, laughter mingled with sorrow. She wasn't just the shadows, she was the light too. I have pain, she confessed, surprising herself with her honesty. But I also have hope. I am more than just fear. Each word became a lifeline, slowly unraveling the tangled threads of her past. With every admission, the darkness pulsed and recoiled, the shadows swirling faster. Jessica felt warmth spreading through her chest, the kind of warmth that ignited in moments of bravery. I will embrace every part of me. Every shadow, every light. As she declared her acceptance of self, the storm overhead erupted into a full-blown rage, lightning striking nearby. The shadows shrieked, flaring with anger, retreating momentarily as if they were being burned by the brilliant light within her, but then, a flicker of trepidation sparked within her, fear clawing back to the surface. What would happen if they fought back harder? Would her newfound strength be enough? Jessica, the voice of her reflection dripped with malice, you think you understand us? The truth is far worse. What have you truly lost? The air turned electric as fog rolled in, thickening and suffocating. You haven't faced the deepest shadows yet. In an overwhelming torrent of dread, she realized this wasn't over. It was only just beginning. What do you mean? She gasped, fear tightening her throat again. Before the shadows could respond, darkness enveloped her completely. The world faded to black, and she felt herself being pulled into the very depths of her subconscious. As she spiraled down into the void, the haunting question lingered in her mind: where was the light supposed to lead her next? The darkness answered with quietude, and from it emerged another whisper, colder than before. Welcome home, Jessica. The void was thick and suffocating, like diving into the depths of an endless winter lake. Jessica felt the weight of the shadows pressing down on her, wrapping around her like icy chains. Panic seized her throat, and she fought to breathe, then a flicker, tiny at first, but growing like a single star piercing through the thick cover of night. With every moment, the light expanded, illuminating a twisted landscape of her fears. The wall of memories she had embraced began to break apart and dissolve into mist, revealing jagged fragments of her past moments she thought had been buried. She stood, trembling, in the ruins of her childhood home. The air was stale, filled with the scent of decay, echoing with the laughter of children and the shouts of arguments that hung like specters over the walls. The flood of sound crashed over her, flooding her mind with images of a family she barely recognized now. Jessica, they echoed, soft and haunting, their voices reverberating through the hall, reaching for her. Don't you remember us? You can't run away. Heart hammering, she turned to face them, the distorted faces morphing from loved ones to grotesque masks of her guilt. She instinctively stepped back, her feet shuffling over broken toys and torn photographs strewn across the floor. I tried to forget, she whispered, the truth pressing against her chest. Forget us? We are you. You can't escape your past, they chanted, their voices merging into a single, chilling chorus. A wave of sorrow swept through her, drowning her thoughts in a tide of regret. She felt the walls closing in, reality bending as the figures advanced, their eyes dark hollows that consumed the light. Stop. I want to lose myself again. The air crackled with energy, the walls vibrating with her desperation. With every ounce of strength, she summoned the warmth that had burned within her moments before. I am not just my failures. I am stronger than this. Brighter now, the light within her glowed fiercely, casting her past in sharp relief against the darkness. The shadows recoiled, hissing and retreating from the relentless brightness. Jessica felt her heart steady, courage swelling from the ashes of despair. Yet with each declaration, the ground shook beneath her, as if the very fabric of her memories trembled at her refusal to succumb. Then the laughter came, cruel and mocking, echoing through the dark halls like a funeral dirge. You think you can face us? You're just digging your own grave, Jessica. You haven't seen the true horror, not yet. An icy shiver traced up her spine. "What do you mean?" In response, the shadows contorted, morphing into ghastly shapes, reflections of herself at the hardest moments: betrayal, loss, abandonment, betrayal again. Each shadow dripped with acid dread, their edges dissolving into jagged mouths that whispered the darkest parts of her soul. "Do you see, Jessica? Your scars run deep. They will never fade," one proclaimed with a voice that sent ice piercing through her. "No. I own those scars," Jessica shouted, but the words fell heavy and hollow against the cacophony of rage. Suddenly, she felt the walls shifting again, another corridor appearing. Was it a way out or a deeper descent into her fears? "You've opened a door, but it's not the one you want. Come and see." The shadows beckoned her as they twisted like smoke. Jessica felt herself pulled toward that corridor, the light retreating behind her in teasing flickers. With each step into the unknown, the terror evolved thick, cloying, and her pulse raced with the question echoing in her mind: could she truly face what lay in wait? As she crossed the threshold, reality warped once more, surrounding her with an oppressive silence. The shadows whispered beyond, taunting her, eager for her to join them deeper in the darkness. "Welcome to your reckoning, Jessica." The floor quaked beneath her, and as she tumbled into the abyss, she realized one terrifying truth: the shadows weren't just reflections of her past, they were the harbingers of her future. What if the worst was yet to come? The darkness engulfed Jessica, and the air thickened like molasses. Her heart raced as she fell through nothingness, waiting for the ground to meet her only to be met with the eerie silence. Then, the jarring impact. She landed hard on a cold, uneven surface. Groaning, she struggled to her feet, disoriented. Her hands pressed against the ground, grazed by sharp shards of glass and debris. It was dishearteningly familiar, the remnants of a shattered dream, a childhood that laid waste in a moment. She looked around. The void morphed again. This time, the walls glimmered as if whispers of light spun delicately against the darkness. It was a hallway, agonizingly long and narrow, stretching into a fog that darkened and twisted. "I am still here," she whispered, more to reassure herself than to proclaim victory. Shadows flitted just beyond her vision, and the hairs on her neck prickled. Then, the laughter from before returned, echoing from the dimness, a cacophony of shrill and mocking tones. "You're trapped, Jessica. You can't escape us." Panic clawed at her throat, but she pushed through. This place, these shadows, they were fragments. She had to keep moving. Breathing deeply, she stepped forward into the hallway. Each echo of her footfall felt like a challenge, a question hanging in the air: how far could she go? Ahead, a flicker caught her eye. A door, slightly ajar, glowed within the gloom, a hopeful light pulsating from its crevice. It beckoned her. Could it be an exit? Rushing toward it, her mind raced with possibilities, but dread pulsed through her veins too. What if it's a trap? She thought. The mocking laughter grew louder, ricocheting off the walls. What if it's worse than what you left behind? Jessica's breath quickened again, fear flooding her senses. "I need to find the light," she urged herself, as she reached for the handle, feeling its familiar warmth beneath her fingers. The glow intensified as she turned it slowly, the door swinging open, creaking against years of neglect. What lay beyond was barely comprehensible. A vast expanse stretched before her, swirling with shadows and flickers of light. It felt like a battlefield of her own psyche, every fear, every regret dancing like phantoms in the dark. In that moment, a cold wind swept through her, chilling her to the core. The shadows shifted, swirling into a towering figure, an embodiment of her despair. Its face was obscured, but the shape was all too clear, and it loomed menacingly, whispering her name with a familiar tone. "Jessica." She staggered back, horrified as its words turned into a growl. "You've feared us all this time. But you'll never be free, we'll always find you." "No!" she screamed. Adrenaline surged, echoing the wild drum of her heart. She could feel anger rise within her like fire. If she had to confront her demons, she would do it on her own terms. Gripping the door frame tightly, she summoned every ounce of warmth from within. "I am more than you," she declared, as she stepped forward, the shadows recoiling for the first time. Energy crackled around her, illuminating the plane as memories started to swirl back to her, moments of love, joy, and strength. "Leave me be," she shouted, her voice echoing defiantly as the entity hovered at the edge of the light. Yet it didn't retreat. "You think you can banish me? You will witness your greatest fear. This is just the beginning." The ground trembled again beneath her feet, and suddenly, walls of darkness closed in, pushing her toward a vortex of shadows. "Where will you run now, Jessica?" As she felt herself being pulled into the depths, a chilling thought pierced her mind. Was the fight truly inside her, or had she only ignited something far more malicious? With a shuddering breath, she realized there was no exit anymore. Only a fight to reclaim everything she had lost. Would she find a way to break free, or would the shadows finally claim her? Jessica's heart felt like a drum pounding relentlessly against her ribcage. The vortex of shadows swirled around her, each tendril of darkness whispering threats and vengeful secrets. But deep within, a flicker of resilience ignited. She took a shaky step forward, then another, refusing to let the shadows consume her. "No," she said, her voice steady against the chaos. "You are not my end." With every word, the darkness hesitated, as if her defiance had caught it off guard. She could feel the air crackle and shift, the shadows pulsed and writhed at her feet, a simmering storm of anguish and fear. But she pressed on, letting the memories of her past, the good ones, unspool in her mind like a lifeline. Her friends' laughter, the warmth of summer days, the comfort of hugs after long days. They grew brighter, illuminating the dark corners of her heart. "I am not alone," Jessica shouted, bolstered by the warmth of connection. "I have love. I have hope. I have light." The shadows recoiled again, and she felt the pull of something beyond her, the whispered voices faltering, responsive to her declaration. "You can't drown me with memories." The demon-like figure growled, emerging from the swirling dark. Its features were an amalgamation of her fears, shame, despair, betrayal, all twisted into a grotesque form. "No, but I can face you," Jessica shot back, her voice reverberating with newfound power. As she stood her ground, the distant glow grew brighter, cascading around her like sunlight breaking through thick fog. It pushed back the suffocating darkness, forcing the shadows to retreat. The entity screamed, a sound that shook the very foundation of her resolve. "You will regret facing your truth. You have not seen your worst fears yet." "Then let me see," Jessica yelled, feeling a surge of empowerment flow through her. In that moment, she wasn't just fighting for herself, she was fighting for everyone who had ever carried the burden of regret and pain. "Show me." The swirling abyss stilled, and she stepped forward into the blinding light, heart racing, ready to confront whatever lay ahead. Suddenly, visions exploded before her, classic scenes interlaced with flashes, a betrayal from a friend, the day her family fell apart, moments she wished to erase. They hurled themselves at her, wreathed in fury that clawed at her spirit, but Jessica stood firm. "These things happened, but they don't define who I am. I am not shackled by my history." The words rippled through the void, sending the recollections shattering like glass. Each memory broke apart, all the while fueling her courage to step further into that beating heart of the light. She channeled the fiery warmth of every joy, every bond, every lesson learned. The figure before her shrieked, flailing against the brilliance surrounding them. "You'll never escape us. We are forever bound." "Not if I choose otherwise," Jessica declared, rage and defiance coiling together in her soul. In that moment, the shadows trembled, and brighter energy surged within her. "I am whole," she claimed. "Stronger than my darkness." With a final scream, she released her fears, letting the shadows fall away like dust. The glowing light around her expanded, towering high and bright, until the echoes of her past dissipated into shimmering fragments of color, washing her spirit with warmth and clarity. The dark entity let out a final wail, dissolving into imploding smoke, and in that fade, Jessica felt a sense of accomplishment wash over her. Breathless, she found herself standing amidst the fading echoes, the night air rushing back in, invigorating and sweet. She was free. Slowly, she turned, knowing she was not only a product of her shadows. There remained a path ahead, lined with the tender memories of those she cherished. With a renewed heart, she whispered into the empty alley, "I will be brave," allowing the memory of the shadows to fade into the night. As she stepped back into the suburban streets she had once feared, she breathed deeply, soaking in the familiar sights. They felt new and bright, untainted by the darkness she had faced. Each step brought her closer to the light of fearless acceptance of herself. "What awaits me is a new beginning," she murmured, and her chest swelled with hope. She emerged into the brilliant dawn, knowing that what haunted her would only strengthen her resolve. Jessica was free. And she was just getting started. If you found Jessica's story gripping, you need to subscribe now to our channel for more exclusive stories. You can't miss out on what's next. Smash that like button right now to help us reach more awesome fans like you. Flood the comments section below with your thoughts, reactions, and theories about Jessica's journey, and what you think is next for her. Don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to hear this thrilling conclusion. True fans know how important it is to support the channel.